Good morning. My name is Ian Skews. I'm a best-selling author and a freelance editor and proofreader. So this is part two of writing your first novel. And you may recall yesterday I'd set up an exercise in which you could write in three stages, three sections, what your novel is about, so what the story was. So what to do today, the next stage, I would suggest is to do a recap on that. So have a read of it and decide, is it good enough? Is it an interesting enough story? Is there enough going on? So bear in mind, you're really looking at this in a very broad brushstroke manner. You're really just looking at the main points, all the big plot changes, and nothing much else at this early stage. So today we'll just go into a little bit more detail. So what I would suggest is, if you now look at that single page of text that you've written and view it as a synopsis of the entire novel. So you have your beginning, your middle, your end. So section 1, section 2, section 3. So one thing I would certainly say is it's at this stage, now that you can see what the story is, you can decide what genre best fits this particular story. So you might decide this is either fantasy or horror or science fiction, or it may be a psychological thriller. It may be a straightforward police procedural. It could be a romantic piece of fiction, for example. It could be historical. So in order to do that, you would need to get to know the genre that you're writing in. So presumably you will have already have read up on some of those genres. So this is the stage where you would decide exactly, is this going to fit into that bracket? You could also view this as the beginnings of a blurb. So for those of you who aren't aware of what a blurb is, the blurb is what you would often see on the back cover of a novel. It's usually in about 3 very short paragraphs, and it entices the reader to read the book. So it serves as a kind of piece of marketing, and it sums up the novel very clearly. So bear that in mind, because that's going to be very important later on for you. And this one page synopsis will actually help you with that blurb, because you already have the beginnings of it there. So this is another very good reason why structuring your novel, whether you're into that or not, is actually a very good idea, because of what's going to happen further on. Because further on you will have to do some marketing and some structuring of your book, especially if you are seeking a publisher, because you will have to go through an editorial process. And if you're self-publishing, I would strongly advise you still do an editorial process, because the editor and or proofreader will discover mistakes and plot holes, for example, that you may not have noticed. Another thing to look out for in today's exercise is study closely the middle part of your novel. I mentioned yesterday that that's often where the story begins to flag a little. Often, some of the most interesting stories, usually something happens right slap bang in the middle of the book that is something of a game changer. So, for example, it might be that a main character or one of the main characters suddenly turns out to not be who they seemed to be. And I should also point out that often what occurs in the middle of the book, usually when there is a major change, it's often a negative change. It's one that negatively affects the hero. So make of that what you will. You can conjure up all sorts of things now. So you've got a lot of freedom within that. It's something that you will find occurs quite often in film and television programs as well. It's a tried and tested method, and it works very well. It just keeps the reader's interest. Usually it occurs as, some kind of negative twist. If you think of the Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy. Think of section 2 of your one-page synopsis as being The Empire Strikes Back, which ends badly for all the heroes, but it keeps the reader wanting more. So it's a very good tool and method for moving into the third and final act of your synopsis, which is a good way of putting this. It's almost like you're writing a mini 3-act play. So if you bear all those points in mind, you'll end up with a very, very strong single-page diagnosis of what your book is about. Often the things that occur in the middle of the book, it can be a negative twist. You can view it that way as well. Sometimes it can be a character is maybe killed off who you wouldn't have expected to be killed off, because up until that point they were very important to the hero. As I said earlier, it could be someone who suddenly transpires not to be who they seem to be. It could even be an event takes place that changes everything. So bear in mind all those points, and what we'll do tomorrow for part 3 is to have a closer look at then thinking about the word count and how many chapters do you think this should be, and how we then break that down and move on to the next stage. So a little bit more planning before you actually start to write the novel, and I can assure you it will be very, very helpful. So I hope this is effective for you. Happy writing, and if you have any questions, do get in touch either on TikTok, or I can be found on www.ianskews.com. Happy writing. Take care. Bye.